issues that is facing America. That's commentary from this talk show host, as well as a lot of the questions that we've received from the audience. I'm just going to start, and maybe just a show of hands for this first question. Do you support school choice legislation? Perfect. How do homeschool families fall into a prospective school choice law? Down at the end, Dan. Wait, I'm sorry. I promised Tony that I would start with him. Tony, you first.
You promised or you threatened? Please repeat the question.
How do homeschool families fall into a prospective school choice law?
Well, if we have tax funds following the student as opposed to following a school seat or a school classroom, it becomes easy. Now, you have to realize that the biggest objection to funding private education is the lack of accountability. And sometimes the issue is not the issue. 2 years ago, 2 sessions ago, there was a last-ditch effort to promote a school choice bill, and it had several factions in it, several sections in it that satisfied everybody's needs. And one of them was that in order to continue getting funding for the following year, a student had to show proficiency at grade level in math and reading and science and so forth, or a 1-year improvement if that student had started out behind. Now, this is 100% requirement for proficiency. At our public institutions, the public school, grade school, we are hovering around 40% proficiency for math and reading. So why do we need to hold private schools and homeschool students and parents and teachers to 2.5 times the standard that we apply to the public schools? It's not an equitable arrangement. Now, even though that satisfied the so-called objection to the Public School Administration, Education Inc., as I like to call it, it did not pass. So we need to come up with a way of measuring students' accomplishments, and not necessarily with standardized tests, but nationally recognized tests. So that would do it, in my opinion.
Dale?
So I think maybe Tony covered a little bit of, but we have to remember that if this is an opt-in program, if you file for money that's following the student, there seems to be a great terror in the homeschooling movement that somehow this will allow the government into their home. Well, if you're not part of the program, then you're not part of the program. But I've said this at another meeting in this building downstairs. If you have a fear, now you said you don't trust government, I don't either, that they're going to come after the homeschoolers, let me assure you, they already are. The drop-off in public ed enrollment has been crashing for 3 years. They're losing funding by that alone. There are murmurs amongst them. There's got to be a way to recover it. So there is a way that we can fix it for all of those who choose to school at home outside of the system. I'm going to be a little sneaky and say I'm not saying it from right here, but if you're interested, you can come talk to me afterwards and I'll share it with you.
Perfect. Anybody else want to, before I sweeten the pot? Elaine?
No, it just reiterating what Dale said. It's not going to be mandatory, it's going to be an opt-in. So if you don't want to be part of it, don't be part of it.
Okay, so, okay, I can't read that, I'm sorry. But we'll bring the essence of the question. What are your thoughts on eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yes.
Yes.
So let me expand on the question here. It looks like, if they follow through with what they're saying, the federal government's going to shut down the Department of Education and put that back. great. The talk show host gets the biggest applause line. You know, one of the biggest complaints that I know I've had, and I've spoke actually to most all of you at one time or another in one-on-one interviews, and I know a lot of you, I know your feelings on DEI. What are you as legislators going to do about it?
Well, Dell and I are on the work group that's going over DEI in our higher education, and the ultimate goal is to come up with legislation to remove it. I did bring some information that I received in an email from our Department of Education, State Department of Education, that they're writing resolutions about eliminating DEI, but we can't sit back and be okay with it because, once again, I'm a reader, and you can read between the lines, and there's still too much wiggle room in it for my taste. So I think that we really need to, even though they're, and some of the schools are saying that they're eliminating their offices of DEI, but my thing is prove it.
So I'm not in the education committee. The one thing we can do is the rules, the administrative rules. We can gut them. That's something we need to do. And we can try to defund. I mean, we've tried to do this, take money from the college, but they always say, like, money's fungible. They can just take it from this pot and use it in this pot. And so ultimately it comes down to the consent of the governed. Are you going to allow your kids and grandkids to be indoctrinated with it? We can pass laws all day long, but the schools ignore them. And unless you're paying attention to what your children are looking at or your grandchildren are looking at, or like how some of you guys went through the libraries and dug out all the pornography, unless you do that, we can only do so much as legislators. We're not magicians, and we can't enforce the law. Only it's by the consent of the people. And so as long as you have citizens that allow their children to be force-fed this, I don't know that there's a ton we can do.
Anybody else want to comment? One more comment before I sweeten the pot.
Expanding on what Heather said, there are some higher education institutions that are worse than others, and BSU comes to mind. We have to separate the education budgets, because when we try and reduce the amount of funding for higher education to penalize one institution, we also penalize those that are not involved with DEI. So it's like, you got 5 kids at home and one of them does something bad, and you say, okay, no dessert for any of you. You're punishing the majority because one person or one institution is forefront as far as promoting DEI, and we can't do that anymore.
So let me add to the topic, and then I'll give the question to Doug to take from there. From the audience, the Idaho Constitution requires the state to fully fund public schools. Why isn't this happening? What do our school districts still require? Excuse me. Why do our school districts still require supplemental levies? Take it away, Doug.
Great. So I'll finish up on the last one. Senators Herndon and Lenny last year brought Senate Bill 1357. Representative Price was going to be the House sponsor for that. It didn't get a hearing in the Senate. Earlier I talked about running for leadership. This is one of those important things that goes with leadership. If for example, if I'm elected to leadership, that type of bill would get a hearing in the Senate. So, and that bill would have made it illegal for universities to have a DEI program. Quite simple. All right, so that's over. The question is alleging that we don't fully fund education. I would counter that the state is taking the position that the money that is sent to local school districts is sufficient to fund local education. And if they want to do more stuff, sports, pottery classes, so on and so forth, if you want to pay the teachers more, then they have to raise that money via levy. It's not that we're shorting them, in my view. It's that they want to do more. And if the local community wants to do more, the law allows them to do that via the levy process.
Let's go on down the line, Elaine.
For example, local school district, we approved through the governor's state of the state wanted to give teachers a raise. So we gave them enough money to give the teachers that raise. They chose to give it to the administration as well. So the money did not cover, and that's where they're saying they're being shorted.
I believe they're fully funded. And it'll never be enough, no matter what it is.
It'll never be enough. How many billions was the budget? When I started in 2011, the education budget was $1 billion. Another $1 billion, I said at the time, they wouldn't be happy with. I think it's 3.5 now. It could be 5.2 counting the higher education. Billion. They're able to say, we need X number of employees, even though we only have 2/3 of that, but we want to be funded for the entire amount so that we can pay them more, so that we can put that money elsewhere instead of, what is it called, for persons, employees, full-time people, full-time FTPs. So the way they're playing and the amount of money that they're giving, they've got to figure it out. I don't know whether it's the unions, I don't know whether it's a top-heavy administration, whatever it is, it's another example of they're getting plenty of money. We just authorized $2 billion for buildings to get roofs done and stuff that's dilapidated. The smaller communities are crying because they can't afford that. And you kind of say, okay, I kind of get that. But what are you doing with the money that we're giving you? Where is it going if you're not keeping your buildings up? It's a complex issue, but when you're talking about DEI, the nice thing about DEI, when enough flames fall out of the air, you're going to figure out you got to get somebody else in there that can do the job. It's too bad you can't do that with education, but you can. All right, sorry.
The state of Idaho has given 16% more money this year than last year out of the general fund for education. 16%. How many of you have gotten a 16% raise in 1 year? None of you. In addition, the governor has pushed for an increase in the teacher's salary to get the average teacher's salary here in Idaho into the top 10 states as opposed to being down in the bottom 5 or so. So there are efforts being done right now to fund, and like my two colleagues have said, it's never enough.
Well, the point Elaine made is relevant, that money that was allocated went into administration. And if you look at the staffing levels of schools, it's staggering how much bloat there is, how many teachers' aides there are, how many other administrative assistants there are. If you look at a private education system, take Kootenai Classic Academy as an example, or one of the Catholic schools, they have a very small staff. Mostly those that are employed are teachers. If you look at the public education system, it's exactly the opposite. Most of the money is being spent on administration. It's not getting to the teachers who need the money to get a decent pay level and to do the job. It's just we're blowing money out the window, and it's ridiculous.
I'll keep it short. Free common schools doesn't really mean fully funded. Right now, the biggest general fund outlay from our budget is for public schools. And as a state, we need to decide, yeah, we could fully fund. What does that mean? We're always going to be chasing our tail. We can direct more of our general fund to public schools. It's a bigger conversation, but I think it's a semantics game when you're looking at that statement. Fully funding and free and common schools doesn't mean the same thing.
There's been a lot already said. I just want to read this one line. This is Article 9, Section 9 of the Idaho Constitution. The stability of a Republican form of government depending mainly upon the intelligence of the people, it shall be the duty of the Legislature of Idaho to establish, maintain a general, uniform, thorough system of public, free, common schools. This myth of the language fully fund, it's a myth. We're getting 40, everyone talks about return on investment. There isn't a person in this room that if you were failing at a business venture the same way that the public education is, that you would continue to fund. You certainly wouldn't be writing extra checks. When I was in school, and I think Joe mentioned gray hair in the room, If you misbehaved, you were sent home. We don't send kids home anymore. We give them an aid. Some classrooms are full of aids. We have taxed the people to death to keep alive a dying system. What changes we need to make it in its entirety, I'm not sure, but it has to change.
So, okay, we're gonna move on because time is always short, and honestly,